Hello there, and today I learned that back in the 90s there was actually a Sega Saturn 2. If you're new here, my name is James. On this channel, we talk about things that I've learned today. And if you want to learn with me almost every single day, please do give this video a like and subscribe as well. Now, for me, as a millennial, I grew up mainly in the 90s, and for me it was a brilliant time for gaming. You know, we had Super Nintendo, the Genesis or Mega Drive, Nintendo 64, even Dreamcast, Sega Saturn. Well, it actually turns out that Sega attempted to make a Sega Saturn 2 codenamed Pluto. Now, obviously this has to do with the planet. I mean, yes, I know we had the Sega Saturn, it was based on the name of Saturn, but Sega Pluto was a really interesting concept, because now it's like, well, it was based on a planet, but Pluto isn't a planet because we decided that in like 2006. Anyway, the Sega Pluto, or Sega Saturn 2, was meant to be like an upgraded Sega Saturn. And it turns out that there were prototypes of it created, and they have leaked out there, and people have actually played on these things, and they do genuinely work. Now, it was never made commercially, it was never available for people to go and buy, and to be fair, most people have probably never even seen this Sega Saturn 2 or Sega Pluto, because we obviously got the Dreamcast in the end. Well, if you're any type of gamer, you'll know we got the Dreamcast in the end. But Sega would try all sorts of different things, and there was also something called the Sega Neptune at one point, but that's kind of, I think that was the handheld of the like upgraded Game Gear or something like that. I'll have to look into that more, learn more, and do another video on it at some point. But the Sega Pluto looked a little bit like the Sega Saturn, but it was a bit longer, and the tray was on the left-hand side. So that would open up and you put the disc in there. So it was meant to be a more powerful version of the Sega Saturn. But I think what eventually happened is Sega gave up on this idea, because they knew that trying to create a Sega Saturn 2 or Pluto or whatever it was going to be called would not have been able to compete or contend with the likes of the Sony PlayStation or the Nintendo 64. So they had to go down the whole new route of creating a brand new console, which ended up being the Dreamcast. And to me, it's probably just nostalgia speaking, but I consider the Dreamcast to be one of the best consoles ever created. It came out when I was, how old was I? I was 15 when it came out, so it was like peak gaming for me. It was what really got me into a lot of modern day gaming, and I still love my Dreamcast even now. But seeing images of this Sega Pluto or Sega Saturn 2, it just boggles the mind, because it looks longer, but it does look thinner. So I guess that's like along the same scale of when they reduce the size and scale of the modern consoles that we've got. Like when they changed the size of the PS4, it was technically the same power, but it was smaller. But I guess that's just technology changing. But it'd be interesting to know just how many of these Sega Saturn 2 consoles were even created, and what would have happened if we'd have got the Sega Saturn 2 that was, I don't know, 64-bit or whatever it was going to be, instead of Dreamcast. Because would that have helped Sega succeed more, or would it have just killed them quicker? Who knows. But yeah, if you're interested in gaming and you've never heard of the Sega Pluto or Sega Saturn 2, go and Google it and go and have a look into this, because it's really fascinating, especially if you are an old school gamer like me and you love playing on Sega Saturn way back in the day, or Sega Dreamcast. It's really interesting to see, and it just blew my mind that all these years I didn't really know that this even existed. It's weird, because I knew that the Nintendo PlayStation existed. That kind of crossover that Nintendo tried doing with Sony, but Nintendo screwed Sony over, and Sony said, right, okay, we're going to release the PlayStation, and then it just blew up, and it was huge. But that's a whole different story. But yeah, Sega Pluto or Sega Saturn 2. What a weird thing to think about 30 years later. There might be some other videos on the screen now. I'm not entirely sure. YouTube likes to change its UI every now and again. But make sure you do subscribe, and that button is just down below, so you can be the first to see anything new that I've learned every day or every couple of days or whatever. Hopefully I will see you in one of my new videos. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and take care.